everyone. Thanks so much for being with us today. This is our Green Certification Sustainability Seminar. So lovely to have all of you with us today. And we have a really great presentation from Emily Lemieux with the Records Management Office. And she's going to talk to us about managing records electronically, paperless records management. So without further ado, Emily, take it away. And again, thanks to everyone for being here, and Emily as well.
Sure, thanks a lot. So yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. All right. So yeah, we've been helping folks go paperless for the past couple years. We've had a little initiative that we've been working really hard on. So this is kind of the culmination of that. And we've added a lot of new resources to our website. And we've also been consulting with people one-on-one. So if any questions come to you after this and you want us to help you, feel free to reach out. You know, sometimes different situations are unique. So yeah, so I have a little agenda here. So I'm going to give some records management basics in case people don't know what our office does, or if this is the first time hearing about our office. And I have tips and tricks to go paperless. And then if anybody has things that come to mind that they want to share about their situation or successes or specific headlet, we'll have time to share at the end. So basically, you might not have heard this. Sometimes people work at the university for a long time and haven't heard, but everything's considered a record by the state of Washington. It doesn't matter the format. It could be something that looks really important, like a contract, or it could be scraps of paper on your desk. They consider it a record that either can go right away and we consider it transitory, or it has some longer retention. And our office is here to support folks and figure out what they need to keep and how long. So it doesn't matter the device and it doesn't matter the form, but we were realizing that paper is sort of on the way out for a lot of reasons, for environmental reasons, but also for information security kind of reasons. So we are helping people go paperless, but really in any format, depending on the function of the record, it might still have that retention attached to it. So there's a law that law I was just showing, it supports our office existing. And then the next one, there's another office called Office of Public Records, deals with public records requests. So that's why it's important to figure out how long you need to keep different kinds of things, because there could be a public records request or audit or litigation about them. So according to that, you need to keep records for the appropriate amount of time and safe from damage and accessible throughout the retention period, and then dispose of records promptly once the retention period has expired. So that's sort of the basics of records management that we help folks out with throughout. So if you don't manage your records, they could be detrimental to your work, it could be expensive, and it could be embarrassing. And this goes to, again, with any form, but it's often easier to manage electronic records than paper for a lot of reasons. So that's kind of why it's good to go paperless as well. And so we're here to support everybody, every office, everybody who works at the university. If you have any questions, and we say that records management saves time and energy and money and patience and space. So we're here for good reasons too, not just to avoid bad outcomes. So yeah, anything that's transitory can go, and anything that's substantive you need to keep, just in any form. But like I said, we've been helping people go paperless last couple years. We did a lot of focus groups. We went all around, and it didn't seem like there was that many reasons for people to stay with paper, and people were sending us less and less paper to our record center. So in February, we just stopped accepting paper records for storage. So we're electronic going forward, and we're here to help people out. So basically, if a record is created electronic, it can stay electronic. It doesn't need to be printed. You don't need to print emails. What you need for that record's retention is just one official copy. So if you have an electronic record and you print it out, the printout is considered a duplicate and you don't need to keep it. So you don't even need to print at all. if it was being created in paper already, then that would be, you know, that first copy, but you could still scan it. But if it starts on a computer, then you have that copy on the computer. So you can just resist printing. A lot of the paper file rooms that we saw throughout the university were just copies of those electronic records. And sometimes they were printed out from databases. And then in that case, the database has the official copy. So as long as people aren't printing, it really cuts down on the paper. What we found in talking to folks was that there's downfalls to having paper. It's not easily backed up offsite. You can't have remote access, especially important nowadays with hybrid work schedules. It's not searchable. You don't have that metadata to see when it was last modified or last created. More vulnerable to natural disasters like earthquakes, slower to locate. So we were just finding that paper was on the way out, and then going digital was the way to go. And we thought it was important to see where the paper was coming from. In our office, we looked around and we saw some processes that were in paper, and we were able to figure out how to make them digital. Sometimes it's as simple as, okay, I get this form in and that's why it's in paper, but you could create a web form. Or, well, my boss signs this, so that's why it's in paper, but then you could get a DocuSign account. People would say, oh, I need to use the paper letterhead, but you can actually get the digital letterhead. Our office, we had tons and tons of Post-it notes up everywhere for all our ideas. We started using a website called Miro, which was great. And again, you can access it anywhere. You can search it. You can see who last modified that sticky. So there's a lot of different project management websites for that kind of thing. So we are finding everything that we could do, we could think of a digital solution. And we didn't find anyone in our travels throughout the university who had something that we couldn't figure out how they could go digital. So it's just looking at where is that paper coming from. If it is just being printed out, then that's something that you can just resist printing it out. But if you have some other reason, there might be, and we could help you if you're looking for some other solution to do that. So the first step is figuring out where the paper is. And then you want to examine your current state. So say you have a process, if you look at what's working well and who likes what aspects, you can copy those processes in a digital way. So if you say, okay, we get this in and then it goes to this person to approve and this other person to approve, trying to copy that same behavior in a digital way makes it so people don't have to think of it differently. So trying to stick with what people are used to, only making it digital is a great way to think of it. And what you can replicate to keep it the same. So if just a digital version of that same paper process, people don't have to learn anything to do. I think that worked out well with our office when we were trying to figure out how to go digital. And but you can also take that opportunity to say, what can we streamline? Like if in a certain process somebody was saving things off somewhere else and kind of forgetting about it, maybe you could say, oh, well, we can take this opportunity to make our processes better. So I think it's kind of talking to the folks in your office about the current state and taking different viewpoints into account. Sometimes people wonder about where to save electronic records. They don't want to kind of invent the wheel, and maybe it was easier to just take the paper and put it in your file next to your desk. But then if it's going to be electronic, and especially if you need to keep it for a long time, you have to think about where to keep it. There's several different common places around the university. They might have different pros and cons. For instance, you might have a departmental shared drive, but in order to make that useful, you have to come up with a good folder structure. EDMS is available from EWIT to store records. It takes a little bit of onboarding. SharePoint's a good option. It takes a little bit of figuring out in the beginning. So if you find a good solution for you and we can help you out with your specific situation, that's kind of the right thing of where do we save it? And then it's good to have your whole office on board with centralizing records so you know where they are. You're not having somebody save the budget files in a place where people don't know where they are and how they're saved. So deciding where to save things, how you're going to save them, that sort of helps people out when they know what to look for. But that's for sure something that we were consulting with folks to help them figure out. And then these little icons on the right, there's different things that you want to consider, like security and how much you might need to collaborate, the ease of setup. Yeah, those are all things we can advise on. We have a resource about this on our website. Some storage locations aren't as good for more confidential information. So it's just good to consider what those records are, and then what you'll need to be doing with them after that. And another great thing is a file plan. So you want to make sure that you can find the records. This is important to do your regular job. And then it's also important, like I was talking about with those public records and audit and litigation. So we've been helping folks make a file plan and answering questions about it. Basically, you want to be able to delete when the retention ends. So you want to put things by function and then chronologically. So you want to think about, what is this record doing? If it's a financial record, then that, according to our general records retention schedule, gets kept for 6 years. So you put them in the folder by year, and then 6 years later, you can just get rid of the oldest one. So you want to keep it simple so it's not unnecessarily complicated, but you don't want just one folder that has a whole bunch of files in it. So you want it to use the folder structure to tell people what's in there and what the function is. Yeah, so you want to be able to find things, and then it's also about safeguarding those more important records. Maybe in paper, you'd have them locked in the cabinet, but you want it similar electronically. So you want it to be the people who can have access, who need to have access, are the only ones that have access. And but you also want it clear what's in there. So that's why we think it's a good idea to put a README file that can tell people what's in there and how to save it. So that's not just the first person who started it, who knows how they're supposed to be saved, that people continue that practice. And if maybe they're looking for some other files, they can be, you know, oh, these ones aren't in here, go this other place or whatever. It's like the README files can help people know what's there and know what they're looking for. And just setting up that file plan that can increase usability. So you don't want things buried too far down in subfolders, but you don't want a mixture of too many records at the top level either. So it's kind of a balance. We're also finding with the file naming that people shouldn't use too many acronyms or abbreviations. Sometimes people later on don't know what that was referring to. So if you do use a lot of abbreviations or acronyms, you can do like a little glossary file to say, this is what's in here. This is what this stands for, to help people know what's in there. So it's all about making everybody's job easier and being able to find out what's actually in a folder without opening up every single file separately. That's the last thing we want people to have to do. We found when we were going digital that it was good to take the whole office into account. If somebody feels a process is too complicated, then they might not end up following it. So to try to take into account different concerns and work that into the procedures, but that doesn't mean that you can't go digital. You just want to make sure everybody's on board. And then when you have that figured out, where you're going to save things, what you're going to call them, the permissions they're going to have, you can save those procedures centrally and then update them based on feedback. So we thought that was good. So then people forget where things are, they can go back and say, ah, that's where I put that. And then if somebody say is finding the, you know, software solution too complicated, like maybe on SharePoint or something, working with folks to give them that support to figure out how to use what you're trying to do. So the idea is to make a decision and have it be central, and then get people on board. We also found it useful to pick a date. So to say, before August 2020, all of these records were in paper. So if you want to look for them, go and check out the physical folder. But after August of 2020, then it's paperless. And then people know where to look. If you have very little, it might be a good idea to just combine them all. But in that case, it's just to say, this is when we're going paperless. And then you can check in with folks to see is there a way to make the electronic process better. We did find that some people went paperless with remote operations in spring of 2020, and maybe it wasn't the best process. Like maybe they needed to work out where to save things or how to get that signature or working on that form. So even though you've gone paperless, it doesn't mean it's the best process. You can always improve and always think of how can we make this easier for people to do their jobs. So you also want to train new staff on what you're doing. You don't want people to have to assume, and that's the way to keep it going. And then when people are offboarding, you want to take away their access to whatever system or folders, but then you want to make sure that they don't have other important records saved somewhere else. So it's that getting everybody on board and then staying on board. And that's the real key to finding the records, because otherwise you might have somebody who just saves things off on the side, and that's not helpful to the other people. We have this very popular service called the ROT Squad. So it stands for redundant, obsolete, and transitory. So if you have a lot of old paper hanging around, we can stop by your office, we can have a look. Most of these consults, it's a tiny minority of paper that needs to be kept for retention. Sometimes it was just stuff that was printed out, it didn't need to. So yeah, the redundant is extra copies. The obsolete is it's well beyond its time. And the transitory is it doesn't need to be kept to begin with. So a lot of times we see that. If we do find that your extra paper needs to be retained, we could, you could label it with the year that it could be shredded later on. So we most of the time, it's very little that needs to be kept after that, but we can help you figure out. The email for that is rotsquad@uw.edu, and it's very popular. People get a little overwhelmed sometimes when the project is far in the past and they didn't even work on it themselves. So they really like that assistance. And for sure, if you have old paper hanging around and it's not yours and you're not sure about it, we can help you out. The other thing is potentially scanning as a solution to getting rid of old paper. There's a state law that actually says you need a scanning policy on file with our office in order to scan paper records and destroy the physical version and have the electronic copy be the main copy. You can check on our website if your office has one. They're pretty easy to get started. That's something we can help you out with. And then you can legally destroy the paper version after the records are scanned. Sometimes you could do one for your whole group, and that way everybody can follow the same process, which can make it easier. Yeah, if you scan things, then it's easier to reference. You have your new electronic records and your older records all in one place. That's the only place you have to look. Sometimes it doesn't make sense if there's too many, or if the records will reach the retention in a year or two, then maybe it's not worth the time. But if you do have kind of, not too many, or you really would rather have them be electronic because of those reasons I was mentioning earlier about being backed up and being more searchable and having that metadata. If you want to have them electronic, then that could make sense, but there are times that it doesn't make sense. It just makes sense to wait until the retention is over. Whatever it is, when you flip that switch to say we're going digital, you can go digital in the future and then just wait for your paper records to go out of retention, or you could scan them and have them all together. So that's kind of a judgment call. But same idea, you want to file them by function with the rest of the records. So you don't want to have a file that says, scanned records. You want to put all the personnel records together and all the budget records together, or the project records together. So you want them to go by function, not saying that they're just scanned records. Another cool thing that you can do, especially if you have a lot of paper around and you're not sure what to do, you can schedule a cleanout day. There's some offices that do this twice a year, and they have us come by and hang out and answer questions. We can give a presentation, or we can give a little activity like a to-do list. And that will cut down over time. So sometimes if people do a cleanup day every year, the future cleanup days are easier because you've gone through it, and there's not too much. So it's a good way to reduce risk for your office and improve efficiency and just, you know, cut down on those piles of paper all around. Sometimes people get rid of the old paper. They can make a student lounge. They can get a plant in there. It's great, extra space. So for sure, if you want to schedule cleanup day, we can be on hand for that. So here's all the steps here. Just to recap, you first want to identify the paper you have. So where is it coming from? Why are we having to deal with this? If it's a form that say gets mailed into your office or people fill out in person, I mean, you could scan those, but the scanning is almost like just a little bridge to you could stop it completely by making a web form and just having people start electronic. And then if you start electronic, you can stay electronic. But then trying to figure out what to do. Okay, well, now you have to consider best storage and software options. So you can see what's available to you, what might work out best. If you do go with a departmental shared drive, you'll want to have a good file plan and good folder naming conventions. And you want to have the right security on there for who needs to access the records. Then you want to examine your processes to see, can you improve things? Can you copy the paper process so that people are still comfortable with how they think of how to do their jobs? But it's always good to improve, and it's always good to take into account what people have to say about how things could be better. And then you want to communicate and cooperate with your team, especially if different people are relying on that process, seeing what works well for people, and training people on the new process too. So to say, we're going paperless, and then here's how we want you to save it, and here's what you want me to do with it, instead of having people save their own records off on the side. So you want to centralize your records for an office so you can be sure the important stuff is all there together. And then, like I said, there could be the question of the old paper hanging around, and that's something we can help out with the ROT squad, or that's something, if you got a scanning policy, that you could scan it and destroy the physical version. So those are your options with that. But really, those first part is shutting off the paper where it's coming in. And if it truly is just printing emails or something, then you can just stop doing that. If it's just copies, you can just stop. But if it's some other thing, like it needs to be signed, then that could take, like I said, maybe a DocuSign account, some other way to think about. And once you stop it and deal with the old stuff, you're good to go. And then if you just want to commit to the future cleanup days, that could be like if you didn't scan paper and you still had it there, and you wanted to just catch that when it reaches its retention, then that's something we can help out with too, just being on hand to help people figure it out. So I have a few discussion questions here. If people want to share. If people don't feel like sharing, but something else comes to mind, you could email me in the future about this, but it's kind of good to think about. So the first question is whether people have any successes to share. If you've already gone digital, this was something with our record center. Used to be much higher, and then around 2017 it really started going down. So we were just really noticing that people have gone digital, and we've really talked to folks and realized that people are finding more and more solutions, and sometimes they need help figuring out the right solution or how to make it better. But we're just finding that people are excited about this, excited about switching over to the electronic records. And we are also finding that working remotely accelerated what was happening already, that maybe the pandemic made that faster, but it kind of was already going that way. So if anybody has any technology solutions they wish other people knew about, or any successes to share, go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know.
I can certainly share, Emily, that this is another great presentation, beautifully done artistically, and even though it's similar material from the last time you presented, it's actually more concise and easier to absorb. I will give you an example that you may or not have heard. working with the university libraries. There were several thousand boxes of material that had to do with asbestos. And we kept having to go back to these boxes based on public records request and physically going through them. And the third time that came around, we bit the bullet and absorbed and converted all the paper into electronic copies. And it ended up being about 3 million copies. And now when a request comes through, we can identify the records that are applicable in about 5 minutes.
Right, the time savings, yeah.
And the huge amount of space that saving the libraries as well. I mean, there were really thousands of boxes that are taking up space in the library. So it's about I throw the gauntlet out. Anyone try and beat that?
3 million pages, that's hard to beat, right?
It took a whole year.
It took a whole year. Wow.
Yeah.
And just think about all the trees, right?
Yeah.
Can anybody beat that 3 million pages?
I think the issue though really is just to get started and, as a group to really I think, and we've been doing that at facilities, meeting as a group to decide as one to make the commitment and start the process and everyone do the exact same thing. So it's replicatable and understandable and all that. So I can't thank you guys enough for your help.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I think that's totally it. I think I sort of think of it like vacation photos, right? In the old days, everyone had their albums and it was on the shelf and it was easy to find. But now there's so many different places that you could store photos, like cell phones and computers, and trying to find those important photos from your vacation, you have to intentionally save it. And it's the same with office records for the electronic records. You have to put it in a way that you'll be sure what's there and you know where to look and that you can trust it. And if you do have good processes where you can say, yeah, that's where those go and that's how they're saved, then you can be sure they're there. But yeah, otherwise it can easily become chaos. It can become saved all sorts of places and people may or may not have access. So that's the way that going paperless is a little harder because you have to be intentional, but then it's easier, as you say, because you can search once you do it. So it's almost like making the decision.
The difference between having a paper copy that you have to futz with and paper cuts and volume and stuff, as opposed to a click away, 1 or 2 clicks away.
Exactly. Does anybody else have on that question? My next one is if anybody has any roadblocks that they want to share, solutions that they tried that didn't work out. I want to say, talking to folks, we didn't really find too many of these, but sometimes, like I said, it was something that could be figured out. Sometimes it's, about that, figuring out that process. Like maybe you need to scan, but you can, what are you going to do for the staff time, get a student or something like that. Does anybody have anything that is preventing them from going digital or that they want to share, get any feedback on?
I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, I saw earlier in your presentation, you mentioned like making the visitor logs digital. So I was wondering, is there a recommended like system you guys are using or what you recommend?
So I've seen 2 cool ones, and one of them was from KUOW. And I used to know the software, but I don't have it at the front of my mind, but I could certainly find out for you. But it was very cool where when you're about to go to KUOW, they send you a link to fill in all your information. And then when you go there, they had it on an iPad and you just log in. And I think it prints you out like your sticker. And I think that, PD had a similar one. But theirs was like a little more serious, you can imagine, because it was the police department. But I could look that up and email it to you because it was very cool. And then you don't have all these papers stacked up, right? It was like much easier, and then less of a line with people coming in because they've already done the more time consuming part before they got there. So it's just a matter of checking in.
Wonderful, thank you. I would appreciate it if you could send me that information?
Yeah, I'll send that along because we're impressed. I think that was at the very start of our initiative, and we're starting to be like, wow, everything that people say, I have to have this in paper, we could find the right thing for. So sometimes it's just a bit of problem solving. Or kind of as Clayton was saying, just making the decision, you know, the intention kind of. Yeah, so if anybody wants to have any further discussion about concerns for their specific office, if any of this gets you thinking, you can let me know. We can have a one-on-one meeting and solve it for you. Sometimes there's some specific reason that people have for holding back on this, and we've been able to help folks. So for sure, let us know. That's something we can help you brainstorm. And yeah, does anybody have any general concerns about managing electronic records or didn't get a chance? Any other questions? Are we good? I think the top of the thing is just being able to find things and being able to trust what's there. And I think that's the important part about the file plans and the file naming and the centralizing the records. I think those are all the things to keep in mind, but for sure you can reach out for any further discussion. And as part of this initiative that we're just wrapping up, we have a lot of resources on our website. If you just go to the records management website under e-records, it's called the Fetch the Future Hub. That cute little pyramid that we were just talking about, we have on there, and that sort of talks more about here's your paper, here's a digital solution. We have choosing the right electronic storage location resource, which is very useful. It talks about which ones are approved for confidential records or not, especially if you work with student records, you want to worry about FERPA and keeping things secure. So that is a great resource. Our best practices for folder structure is broken down by record series, and we have examples on there and models for all the different types of records. One thing about that is some records have a cutoff of that is time-based, like it's just 6 years after the fiscal year. But other records, you have to wait until a student leaves or an employee leaves. So sometimes that waiting part is the harder part about the managing the records, because you have to have all your active employees together and then your inactive employees and then count them down by year. So if you have that event-based cutoff, that can be a little harder for people to understand, and that we have examples on how to follow on our website. We've also got recommendations on file and folder naming conventions. I was alluding to some of those, but we have a lot more information you could look at your leisure. Just again, you want to be as succinct as possible, but you want to give as much meaning as possible. So you want to help your coworkers and your future self figure out what that record is without having to open it, without having to look at every single thing, just that they can say, they can be guided by the folder structure to say, oh, okay, these are the budgets, this is the year, I can trust what that is. And then if you've done a really good job on that, that makes it much easier to get rid of older records because you can trust what's there. And then we have a lot more information on there about maintaining your digital filing system, structuring your electronic files. So a lot more examples that you can check that out. And we keep adding to this too, based on what people think. People wanted guidance on like Slack and Zoom recordings. So we keep adding. If you come across anything that you really want help with, that you think we should make a resource, you could let us know. But yeah, that Fetch the Future Hub on our website, a lot of information. It was based on focus groups that we did with folks all over the university who were telling us what they needed, what the roadblocks were for going digital. So those should be helpful for you. And then if you have any coworkers who really like paper and they're not sure about switching to a digital environment, you could send them to, we have a little training video and we have all of our tips on there. So be sure to check that out.
Emily, we have a question from Teresa Anderson. It says, do you have a counterpart in UW Medicine? Our records contain PHI or are related to HIPAA retention?
Okay, so that's a great question. There's a separate office called UW Medicine Records Management. So anything that is patient records they're the shop for that. Like clinical research records, they're the shop for that. Sometimes it gets a little confusing, I know, because like in the School of Medicine, sometimes it'll be like faculty who teach in the School of Medicine, but they also work in UW Medicine. So sometimes it gets a little bit confusing, and we can help folks figure that out. But yeah, these definitely, what Teresa mentioned, that's for the UW Medicine Records Management, which is a separate office. Any other questions? Here's our contact info here. Again, the Rot Squad is super popular. If you have piles of paper, or if you even have any digital records that you want help with, there's that email there. And then it's my email there if anything else comes to mind. But just to sum it up, doing this whole initiative, we just found that there wasn't really any good reason for people to stay with paper, that we were able to figure it out, and pretty much it was better for everybody. And it's sort of the thing that was happening anyway, but then the pandemic sort of hurried things along. So we're feeling really good about our ability to help people with electronic records, especially because we just stopped accepting paper at our storage center here. So this is our future and everyone else's future, and we're much more trying to be with what's the modern thing, as opposed to helping people with the older records, right? We want to be on the cutting edge of things. So hope that you can go paperless, and if you have any problems, you can let us know.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. And does anyone else have any more questions for Emily? So nice to have a subject matter expert here. So
yeah, save the trees. Right?
Yes, woohoo! Yeah. And also, if any of you on the call would like to send this recording to colleagues or people in your departments, it'll be up on our website in about a week. We'll have the recording, so feel free to share it. We love to get the word out about this. So yeah, again, thank you to everybody, and especially Emily.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.